Inspiration for me is not something that happens randomly. It's the moment I sit down in front of a blank project and start experimenting. That's when the real magic happens. What's up guys, Redoxx here, and today I'm gonna show you how I made my track Wandjina. Let's dive right in. Okay, so Wandjina is a track that got released a few months ago with Lump Records. You can find it everywhere, Spotify, Beatport, Apple Music, whatever you like. You'll find it there for sure. So go check it out if you haven't done that yet. And today we'll be diving into my Logic Pro project and checking out how I made the song. So this is my project over here. And for a lot of you, maybe not exactly experts, you might think that there's a lot going on. And for those of you who have been producing for a bit longer, they might actually think that it's a bit empty. Now, the thing is, I've had projects with 50 tracks or more. Usually, actually, there are much more than that. You will find more than 40 tracks on the project. Here we have just under 30, which for me is awesome. It's a great win. I always think that less is more, and I definitely like to work with less stems at the end of the day. If I'm working on the mix or whatever I have to do, if you have a lot of stuff going on, you can get confused, you can get overwhelmed very easily. But here it's a bit easier. Anyways, 30 tracks is still not little. There's a lot going on, and let me show you step by step. So first of all, I usually start with the rhythmic elements because I believe that constitutes the core of the track. So when I talk about rhythmic elements, I'm talking about the kick, I'm talking about the bass line, I'm talking about all the different percussions, the toms, the snares, whatever you have. So let's check out what I have in this project. So first of all, we have a kick. Very simple kick, I like it. I have to say I'm not that inventive when it comes to kicks. I have a couple of kicks that I really like, that I know work well with my tracks, with the type of sound that I try to go for, punchy in the right way, but obviously the kick is always going to be your choice. Everything is always going to be your choice. But one thing that I will say, especially with the kick, I see so many producers spending hours and hours and hours just selecting the right kick. So it sounds like 2 hours of just boom, boom, kick. And at the end of the day, you even forget what you were going for. So I would say, as a rule of thumb, stick with a couple of kicks that you know, that you like, that you know work well with your music genre. Don't spend too much time when it comes to kicks. You can always tweak them at the end of the day when you're working with the bass line and stuff like that, but don't spend hours and hours on kick selection, especially if you're using a sample. Selecting the kick for hours, it burns you out. Trust me, I've been there. Anyways, we have our kick going on. Now the first thing that I do personally is kick and bass. Then everything else comes after. If the kick and the bass, they're working well together, then odds are you have a track that is probably going to be running the way you want it to run. That is crucial. I hear so many great tracks out there. They don't have a good kick and bass ratio. They don't work in a club. It's as simple as that. So we listen to my kick. Now I'll play the bass line, which is this one. I exported this in audio, as you can see over there. I usually work with a hybrid between MIDI files and audio files. MIDI, for who doesn't know what that is, MIDI is a type of information, is a type of language which basically represents melodies and notes that are played out. So if you have a keyboard, a synthesizer, or even if you're just drawing the notes in your DAW, in this case Logic Pro, that will be a MIDI file. Audio files are actually much simpler. They're just audio files that you download on your computer and you drag them into your file. Whatever you download online, whatever audio you put into your computer, you can drag it in your Logic Pro and that will be your audio file. Now, as you can see, the project, my project, is pretty colorful, and I love to put a lot of different colors on my tracks because it gives me more of an idea of what I'm working with. But a lot of people don't do that, and they just end up working with these projects that, if you're using Logic Pro, they're half blue, half green. Blue is the default color for audio files, and green is the default color for MIDI files. And that's just, it's not just sad to work with, but it's also rather confusing. So I would definitely, for anyone watching who is looking for a tip, the tip would be definitely use color coding, which you can find over here. Just go down, and here are the colors, and then you can just choose whatever color you want to work with. Anyways, kick, bass. This is the bass, we listened to it. Now, how does it blend with the kick? I'm gonna solo the kick first, and then I'm gonna introduce the bass so we get a bit better of a feel for it. Now at this point in the production, I'm already having fun. Again, kick and bass working that way, I like it. It's fun. I can keep on going at that point. Obviously, what is going on the bass, I'm not going to go too much in depth on the plugins that I used or the compressors, equalizers, or whatever. Just the basics. I'm here to tell you guys how I made the track, not to make a 3-hour masterclass on every single little tweak that I made. Anyways, what's going on the bass? There is an equalizer going on here to give it more of a punch on this side of the frequency spectrum, and there's a compressor. Now, for some reason the sidechain channel is disabled. I don't know why that is, but it definitely should be enabled. You can already hear the difference with the sidechain and then without. And if you're only listening to the bass, you might say, hey, it sounds better without the sidechain. But when the kick comes in, this is with, and this is without. It's just super, super muddy without, because the frequency of the kick is colliding with the frequency of the bass, and you never want that. So definitely always sidechain your bass lines, always. Very important. Anyways, kick, bass, we have the sidechain on the bass line, it's working well. What else do we have over here? Well, this is a bit of a dead part of the track. So let's go over here where we have all of the percussions happening. Because this is essentially how I started the track. I started with all of the percussions, and then obviously I distributed and layered the different parts of the track in different moments of the track. But at the end of the day, I always just started with the percussions. So I definitely started with the kick. The bass is over here. The next thing that came into play is the snare. Very similar with the snare. I have a few snares that work really well with me that I really, really like, and I keep on using the same ones. It's a very similar situation like the kick. It's one of those things that you can spend hours and hours in, but definitely there's more, in my opinion, creative fun when it comes to choosing your snare than choosing the kick. So definitely, if you want to spend some time choosing the right snare, definitely go for it, because it can make such a huge difference. This is a snare that I like. Listening to it now, fun, I love it, very cool. Okay, shakers. Then we have these bells, which are really subtle. I'm gonna solo them for a second just so you can hear what they do. It's so subtle. You might not even hear anything at all. Very subtle, it's there. It has this high-pitched bell sound that I personally really, really liked in this track. Anyways, kick, snare, shaker, percussions, and bass sound like this. You can hear the bell. You can definitely hear the bell. Tambourine. And then percussions that I called gypsy percussions for some reason. It's interesting because if you actually listen to these percussions, they're not that gypsy. But if you layer them with the tambourine sound, I see why I called them gypsy. Anyways, what else do we have here? We have a white noise. A lot of music producers don't use this, and I think it's a shame. It's just the easiest thing in the world, just a white noise. And what you do with that, you keep it at a very, very low volume. Over here, what's the volume? I kept it at minus 40 dB. It's almost silent. If you hear it, if you solo it out, you definitely hear it if I'm playing it solo, but if I play it in the track, you almost don't hear it, but then when you mute it and you get it out, you feel that something is missing. This white noise is meant to give you a bit more volume, especially in the parts of the track like the drop. You definitely need a little bit more of that volume, and they fill out the frequency spectrum areas that usually tend to be a bit emptier. So that just gives it a bit of a wider feel. Obviously, always sidechain your white noise, especially if it's on a drop, if there's a kick. Remember that. It's extremely important to sidechain all of the elements that should be sidechained when you have a drop happening, or at least when you have a kick going in. Remember the sidechain. I'm saying this because sometimes it happens that something feels muddy, I don't know what's happening, and then I realize there's no sidechain on it. Obviously, use whatever sidechain compression you prefer. I usually use the kickstart. It's very easy, intuitive, quick. It's basically just a knob. But if you want to tweak it, if you want to have a little bit more options, then just open up a compressor and do it manually from there. So that's basically it when it comes to our rhythmic elements. So let's hear them all together. There's a groove going on, and that's what we're looking for. Obviously, it's very minimal. There is nothing much happening in this part of the track, but if you get this part wrong, don't bother going on with the next part of the track, like the melody or whatever. Obviously, there's a lot of people that start up with the melody, and that's perfectly fine, but the rhythmic elements have to be on point before you even think of potentially adding things to your track that might make it a good track. It's not going to be a good track if your rhythmic elements are not on point. That is very, very important. Then the way you go about your music production when it comes to those rhythmic elements, everyone has their own method, and that's perfectly fine. But they need to sound good. That part, the rhythmic elements, need to sound good. What's interesting is that, as I said, usually I start with the rhythmic elements almost religiously. This track is the only track that I remember where the process was different. I actually started with the intro because I had a really cool, fun idea for the intro, so I started with that, and then I introduced the rhythmic elements. And I won't lie, it was a bit disorienting because I usually start with those, and it makes everything much easier, at least for me, because I'm used to that. But let's dive into the intro right now, and then we'll combine what we've done in the intro with the rhythmic elements, and then you'll see that 90% of the track is basically just that. So the intro starts with these horns. And they go up in volume, not only in volume, but basically, if I open my automizations here, there's an automization for the volume, but there's also another one for the equalizer, the channel EQ, which means that basically I tried to open it up more and more, and this is how it looks like. It might be easier to show you. You can see it's moving over there, which means it's opening up and it's letting more frequencies go through. And the whole idea of this was to have this haunting horn, which starts out small and then slowly becomes bigger and bigger and bigger, almost overwhelming, to give you some kind of a sensation of darkness. And I think it achieves it really well, because if we go in the end part of these horns, they become really haunting. almost distorted, right? Now we layered these horns with these chords over here that are made from a pad that goes like this. Same thing happens with the pad. Also on the pad, same optimization, slowly opens up. Channel EQ opens up. There's even a bit of echo that I put over here, always on the optimization, which means that it slowly changes, and it slowly opens up more and more. And I've done that now with the horn, with the pad, and with the second pad, third element. That sounds like this. Okay, so all three together, so the two pads and the horn will sound like this. And I really love that effect. The fact that it's almost creeping up on you and it's getting louder and louder and it's getting more and more invasive and almost disturbing. It's really the haunting element that I was going for in this intro. Now, over here, this is a fun part. I really liked doing this. I recorded some street sounds and dragged them into my project. And basically this, I called it background noise, but it's basically recorded people on the street, and it goes like this. You can hear there's conversations going on in the background. You can't really understand what's happening, but this background noise was meant to give you a sensation of being in a crowd, being outside, being in a city specifically in my head, and having this haunting horn with the pad slowly coming after you. This was the whole goal. So if we put them together, and then let's see what other elements we have over here. All the percussions, not all the percussions, but some of the percussions come in. So with the percussions, the background noise of the background city noise, and an atmosphere pad, actually 2 atmosphere pads, this is what happens. Now you probably guessed it, with the percussion, exactly the same thing is happening. It's opening up slowly, same thing as the horn, as the pads, everything is opening up slowly. So it's getting closer and closer to something haunting and disrupting. Together with this, I put the bass stabs in, so basically our bass line is already in, and also obviously optimization, it's opening up, so it gets more and more aggressive, and there's a bit of a texture note. You can hear the bass line coming in. It's like something's about to happen, right? That's the whole goal. And the last thing that I left for last is the intro ARP, which is over here. And actually, yeah, here it is. Okay, so obviously it opens up slowly. That's why it was a bit tricky, because at the beginning I couldn't even hear it. Because again, you can see that the project is going on, but you can't hear anything because it's coming. The volume is going from minimum, and then it's pushing it up just like the rest. And when we put everything together, this is our intro. So I'll cut it off over here. What I tend to do in my tracks, when there's a transition that goes from one part of the track to another. So let's say here we're passing from the intro to what I personally call a mini drop, because it's not the complete drop with everything in it. But anyways, what I tend to do, what most music producers do, and what I think to some extent people should do, is that they start in the last 4 or 8 beats, they take something out and they only leave a few elements, okay? And the reason why you do this is because it creates anticipation. The listener understands that something is going on, something is changing, so they anticipate a new segment of the track coming, which we always want, because you don't want to, it's fine, the element of surprise is beautiful. I try to use it as much as possible in my tracks, but you don't want to surprise them too much, because it really doesn't sound that cohesive if you don't have a bit of a transition. So the best way to get a transition going on in these parts of the track is just to take some things out and leave a few in, okay? Sometimes you just want to take out 1 or 2 elements, like if you have a kick going on, we'll get in there later in the track, you'll just take out probably 4 bars or 8 bars of kick, and that's enough. But if you have an intro like this, you'll just keep maybe, what do I have over here? 1 percussion and the synth loop. And that's all that stays. The rest is just echoes and reverbs of what was there. Listen to it again. That creates anticipation. And now we go into the next part of the track. All we have going on here is the kick from before, the same horn. As you can see here, there's written horn plus sidechain. So it's the same identical horn, there's just a sidechain on it. We have the ARP, the one that I called intro ARP now becomes lead ARP, but it's the same ARP, it's just processed a little bit differently. You can see here a lot of funky things happening with the EQ to make it sound good. And there's a kickstart, there's a sidechain, because there's a kick coming in. Same thing happens with the pad. There's actually a new pad over here, which, is it actually different from the other ones? This is a serum pad, and it's a D pad 1. And this one over here, what is this? D pad 1, yeah, it's the same one. I don't know why I called them differently, but it's the same identical pad, just with the sidechain on it, and maybe processed a little bit differently, but nothing new. Bass stabs, bass line is there, and then we have an exhaust. These are just effects that you need, that I personally always try to incorporate in my tracks. It's the most boring part of music production for me, to incorporate those little things just to make the transitions a bit smoother. It's like, I know I have to do it, otherwise it doesn't sound that good and professional and whatever, but it's a bit boring. It's much more fun to work on all the rest. So there we go, that's the exhaust. So anyways, this is the transition. I keep those horns. I keep those horns going on for basically the entire track. Actually, I'm looking at it now. The entire track. Only here, I left it empty because I needed a break because the vocals come in. But for the rest, that haunting horn is there the whole time, from the first second to the last. And that was the intention, to give that haunting feeling constantly. And this, let's say, contrast between light and dark, and the horn is definitely the dark part. The lighter part obviously would be the ARP, okay? This is very not dark, this is very light. Obviously it's high pitch, high frequency, and the voice is also pretty bright, I would say, even though it does have a haunting element to it, which I love. So anyways, second part of the mini drop introduces the shaker and the percussions, basically, almost all of the percussions. White noise also. As I said before, new segment of the track, so I remove 4 kick bars over here. Standard. It works, it really works well. It gives you that sensation that you're getting into a new part of the track. It introduces it. And in the new part of the track, what changes, the only thing that changes now at this point is that more percussions are introduced. But to introduce that, we take out 4 kicks. So this is how it sounds. It gives more emphasis to the percussions that enter. Without, it would work, but this is definitely better. Same thing, end of a segment, take out 4 kicks. You can do 8, you can do 2, depending on your project and your intention. Anyways, we are going from the first drop that I call a mini drop because I know that there's another drop coming that has a vocal, so it's not the main drop, but it is essentially what you could call a drop. And we go into the first actual break. Now, what happens on the break is we obviously keep the horn. You can see here the background noise of the people on the street. It comes back, it's more powerful, higher volume. There's a bit of a fade in here, so it's not annoying. The percussions, I keep them all. This is something that not a lot of music producers do. They usually, when they go into the break, they take everything out immediately, and that disturbs me because it's tough for a listener to go from a track that is full on groove with so many percussive and rhythmic elements and then be left with nothing. It's cool, it creates this emptiness, but personally, I usually prefer to keep some percussions going and then maybe take those percussions out a little bit later. So for example, here we don't have the vocal coming in just yet. So before that happens, in that transition, I'm gonna keep all of the percussions, no kick, no bass, so it is essentially a break. Horns always stay there and background noises. And that is one of my favorite part of the tracks. This is actually a sample that I just loved and I dragged into the project and it just sounds so good. What did I put on it? A bunch of reverb, not that much actually. I put on some reverb. It's really good, I just really like it. Obviously it comes down to personal taste, but my personal taste was very happy when I heard this. So, and it really, really works to the point where it feels like it gives this kind of a recognizable, in my opinion, taste to the track. So anyways, this is the break. Now, all that stays is one shaker, this one, and the vocal. And that's it. This is the first time that the vocal is introduced. I'll solo it for you. So, I fell in love with this. I personally really love it. There's something about African vocals that really, really... It depends, obviously, on the vocal that you decide to work with. Your track is, I'm not saying going to depend on it, but almost. Of course, there's a bunch of things that you can do, and at the end of the day, the track is not the vocal, but the vocal is fundamental. It gives it a signature. It's the signature of the track when you have a vocal track, which, for example, I don't always. A lot of my tracks are instrumentals. I released an album with Cafe De Anatolia in 2022 that was only instrumental, so I love to work with instrumentals. But if you're working with a vocal, definitely pick the right vocal and work that vocal, tweak it if you need to make it sound good, because it's really important. Again, I took all the rhythmic elements out, but I left the shaker just to give a sense of rhythm, to not have any listener feel completely lost. It's good that there's emptiness, but a little bit of rhythmic element still needs to be there, in my opinion. Wandjina. Main drop. Over here we have the same things that are happening in the what I call the mini drop, but we have a vocal, and it's divided into two sections. First section is without the lead synth, and in the second one the lead synth comes in. I like to do that to introduce variety. It sounds good, even if we put the lead synth already at the beginning of the drop, it still sounds good, but it gives you less of an element of anticipation. You don't want to give up everything immediately. It should be growing, so the drop is divided in two parts. First part, without the synth. Second part, the synth and the chords with the pad come in, and this is what it sounds like. Again, variation. We have 16 beats going on. Variation, which will mean the introduction of the shaker. Of the snare. Second part. At this point we're almost done, because there's just one more break part over here where we introduce a new section of the vocal, which is exciting because you don't really expect it. You got the vocal, you think that's all there is. There's a new section of the vocal that gets introduced over there, and then at that point we have another, similar to the mini drop, we have another mini drop and then an outro. This is how it sounds. Again, this little flute sound. And to make a good, nice, cool, fun transition into this second or third drop, at this point I lost count, is the fact that we, in the vocal over here, we created a separate track, and we basically cut this part of the vocal, put it in here. The difference between these two, you might be noticing it already if you check out the channel strip, is that over here we have an echo going on. So it gives it more of this ominous feeling, like something is going to change. And over here, I chopped up the remains of the vocal, so it becomes vocal chops with an echo. Here I had to put the sidechain back because the kick comes back in, but it gives this feel, this ominous feel, and it really gels well with this next part of the track, which is more aggressive. You almost don't hear the vocal chops, but they're there. This is their function. I'll solo them. And at this point, we have the outro over here. The outro is similar to the rest of the track. It's just elements that I left behind on purpose, obviously, like the synth, like the pad, like the white noise, like the snare. So it gives it the feel that the track is weakening because it's getting into an outro, so it's ending. You see, these transitions are fundamental, because if I didn't do any transition over here, let's just try it out real quick, just for fun, just to give you the feel of how not cool it sounds if we keep everything the same way, right? So we'll put the white noise over here too. I'm not sure what optimization I put here. Okay, that's fine. And let's take these out, right? Okay, so this is what happens. It's disorienting. It's like something almost went wrong. But with all those little elements that seem silly, but they really give the track this feel of like this gel feel between all the different sections of the tracks, which sometimes can be a tough thing to do, but easy solution usually in these cases. Anyways, this is the outro. And it ends with this very big haunting horn. And that's basically it. At the end of the day, if you have your rhythmic elements going on well, you have a cool lead sound, a great vocal, because I have been blessed with a great vocal on this track. If you work on one section where everything works well together, at the end of the day, it's mostly going to be a copy-paste exercise for most parts of the track. Obviously, there's going to be the breaks, there's going to be variations, you're going to want to get creative with it, change, mix things up, absolutely do all those things. But if you have one big block where you have all your main elements and they sound well together, you are set for success, definitely. That's if I could give out one suggestion, it would definitely be that one. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Subscribe, like, comment, tell me what you think about the track, tell me what your production techniques are and how they differ from mine. Super excited to hear all of that, and I'll see you guys next time.